Hello, this is Tim Wotton. This is the Gift podcast, where we focus on the power of the mind, mindfulness, and being more present to help overcome life and health challenges. And it's been shown to bring more resilience, calm, and joy into our lives, something we all would like. I am absolutely delighted to have my guest today. He's my first ever Canadian, so he's ticked the box there. He lives in Toronto. He's mid-30s. His name is Warren Falkenstein. And I was tipped off about Warren by a good friend of mine who's also been on this show and said, this dude, you must get him on your show. And he was kind enough to accept. So let me explain who Warren is. Warren is a true warrior. I could stop there, but there's so much more to tell you. He's a walking example of mind over matter, and he'll explain why that is so relevant. He uses his disability and chronic illness as a means of purpose and a gift from above to be used to uplift humanity through purpose, compassion, and service. And as you'll hear, because he's a wonderful speaker, he's a 4 times award-winning, well-known inspirational speaker, adversity and mindset-based coach, author, spiritual thought leader, and teacher. He's also an entrepreneur, energy healer practitioner, and meditation artist. I'm glad I did that in 2 breaths. He's got so much going for him. He achieved so much. So Warren, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate your time and thank you for the invite to be on your podcast.
Good man. Let's delve into the questions. And I tend to sometimes reverse the order on the ones that people think is a standard question at the end. I start it at the front. And that is, how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Humorous.
Humorous, yeah.
Funny. Yeah, I'd say humorous, inspirational, and compassionate.
Compassionate. Okay. And we're going to delve into that compassion later. Now, you're going to tell the listeners and myself quite a lot about you, but what might be something about you that very few people, hardly anyone knows about, that you can just be vulnerable or share us? It could be something amusing. It doesn't have to be vulnerable. What might be something that very few people know about you?
I have a dry sense of humor.
Okay.
It's inherited from my father, and I love it. But I only use it when I feel like, it's safe. I guess that's one thing. But you did remind me of, I laugh at myself a lot.
Yeah.
And I find that's something that's very valuable, to have a humor and use it against myself and laugh at my own, when I fall or when I do something, something, my own setbacks, I would laugh at myself at. Or when I have situations, for example, if I what will be an example? If I forget somebody's name, right? So
Okay.
I was at a party once, and then I forgot somebody's name, and I called them the other name the whole time at the party, and then I asked her how the party was the next day. And it wasn't her.
Oh no.
It was somebody else.
Oh
They're
my
like,
gosh.
what party? When I messaged them, I'm like, what party? And it's just funny, because like, it just shows, at that moment I was laughing. I was like, how much we have to always give more attention to people and just pay more attention. And just, sometimes we haven't seen someone in a long time, but then you get mixed up or whatever it is. But like, especially when they're not someone that you're that close with, right?
Yeah, and going back to sort of self-depreciating, it's very much part of my character. I joke with my wife that our wedding vows, instead of in sickness and in health, should have been in sickness and in sickness, due to my long-term condition. And just being a bit playful with that at times, just it makes you laugh, and that helps.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like you to explain and share with the listeners about your degenerative condition. Explain, you didn't always have it. It went undiagnosed for many years. I remember that from previous chat with you. maybe you can just fill in the gaps. But importantly, how you've dealt with it physically and mentally, or how it's affected you in those ways, and what it's taught you about yourself.
So I was born fine, normal, like healthy living baby. And as I grew up, I started accumulating different ailments, and the doctors didn't know what they were. The doctors didn't know what was going on at the time. They thought it was just a childhood thing. He was just walking funny. I had maybe it was a childhood gait, maybe it was just a childhood rash. So at that time, as a child growing up, it was a process of running to different treatments and hospitals and different drugs and prednisones and all that stuff. But like a lot of the unknown was in the air. We didn't know what was going on, and then there was like sudden pains. And over the years throughout my life, like I've a lot more of functionality, or parts of my fingers or extremities, and it started to affect me in different ways. But it was not known or what would be the outcome of the event of the series of events throughout my life. And what happened was that it was scary, obviously, and especially as a child, wanting to be like everybody else, play sports, or do things like that. And there were those moments, of feeling down or feeling scared or feeling depressed. But over time, I noticed, if I look back, how adaptable I became to different situations, and spending my entire of my early like as a young adult, I spent most of my time in a wheelchair. I remember in high school, like I was always in the wheelchair. I was dragging it along with me, and at times it was hard, but because of the way that I chose to develop my character and have compassion and be as sociable as possible and still be me, I managed to surround myself with good people, in a sense that they either didn't see me as someone with a disability, or they just treated me like somebody who doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
And just like the moments of a friend pushing me so fast in that wheelchair that the wheels would start shaking, would be like a memory that it was like a roller coaster. And I'll never forget those moments, because that's just fun, right? Or like rushing down to class, or in high school, like we're running around the halls, and like we knew we knocked somebody out in the elevator or this or that. Like, it's okay, I have Warren, right? Like, use me as the scapegoat, like so it's like, let's do it. Or I'm late for class because we went I remember once we were late for class because we went for burgers, because we pushed the wheelchair up the hill, and like I was helping Warren, so I mean, like, I was cool with that. I was a team player.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, to go back to your question, I mean, it's a journey, and we all have challenges, and some of our challenges may seem more heavy than others, and some of them, it's all about what we can handle. And that is something that I hold on to with everything I got. And I believe for some reason, we are only able to handle what we are given. And to go deeper into that is to understand that our vessel is only as big as we can create it. And the more that we go through the challenges in our lives, the bigger our vessel is, in order for us to maintain it and be able to deal with those situations that come our way. So in my case, for example, people would come up to me and say, "Oh, I can't complain to you," or or like, "You're on the crutches, you're in the wheelchair. Oh, your hands, like, how do you do anything?" Like, "Oh, I have no right to complain to you." My response, especially when I'm coaching somebody, is, "Yes, you can." And that's the first step, is to acknowledge what it is that you're going through. And you don't have to phrase it as a complaint, but you phrase it as an acknowledgement of that is what you're dealing with, before you build a relationship with that pain or that struggle. And you can go to be afraid to complain, but that is what my biggest lessons.
And maybe just give the listeners an idea of how it affects you in day-to-day life. You mentioned crutches, you mentioned wheelchair. Um, there's quite a lot of parts of you that you not haven't got the same whatever normal is level of activity. So it does affect you, and there is pain. So you don't get a day off this, like I don't get a day off my cystic fibrosis and diabetes. But you've learned to, you said it yourself, accept and then adapt. Those two words I think are just crucial. Because if you're the victim to something, you'll never even get to the accept part, let alone look at ways you can transition into a worthy life.
100%.
But that doesn't come overnight, does it? You said though during your school years, you had this persona, this mindset. So obviously in your DNA, you had the negative stuff, but you've also got the huge positive mindset. That
Yeah.
is, you've just leaned in on it. It's not like you're being false or fabricated it. It's there for you, and you know that feels the right way, as opposed to being what I call a BMW, which is a bitcher, a moaner, and a whiner.
Mhm.
Which I always think with my conditions, if ever I'm a BMW, I'm just bored of myself within seconds. Sound like a broken record, so I don't even go there now. Complaining means nothing. It doesn't achieve anything. But
Mm.
as I say, for you, it's probably something you've evolved and got better at and learned some harsh lessons, because I can only imagine, Warren, you do, and you will have some dark moments, and you've still got to tackle them. It's not like your attitude and mindset just covers over everything. Those dark and negative thoughts will still be there. Is
Yeah,
that the
no, for
case for
sure.
you?
Yeah, the case, yeah. And definitely it doesn't come overnight. And definitely there has to be a way to, I don't really like using the word self-motivate, but there's an inner purpose, an inner drive that helps me is one of the tools that I use to overcome what it is I'm going through. So for example, it's very hard for me to acknowledge. It's very hard for me to acknowledge what it is that I um, accomplish. And for some people, it's great because then they can list all their accomplishments and all that stuff. And for me, I've been battling that for a while because I don't pay attention to the daily activities of what I actually do
Hmm.
and what I actually have to go through every morning, and how hard it is to walk to the bathroom in the morning, or what's going on with my foot, or whatever is going on, if there's a flare up or whatnot, because that's what it is. And that's what it is, and I'm still going to carry on as much as I can, because I believe with all my heart and soul there is a reason for living, and our gift is our life, and our life is our gift. And every single day when we wake up, we're still needed. And if we're still needed here, then there has to be something that we can do. And living a life of service to others and also taking care of yourself at the same time is something that really drives me. But when it comes to the downfalls, and when we do have our breakdowns and when we do fall, the most um, valuable thing that I do is to feed the subconscious daily. I
Hmm.
have to. And it's the only way to keep on going. So whether it just means listening to a tape, listening to your podcast, listening to Tim's podcast,
Good man.
or
Well said.
I was actually listening yesterday. Um, something that's different than what it is right now, right? So it's one thing to, I can do this, I'm strong, I do all your affirmations, but when you're reading a book, or when you're reading a paragraph, whatever it is, a meditation or whatnot, something that connects to something within you, but also brings in outside information that will help you, right? So whether it's a business book, or whether it's a spiritual book, or whether it's a motivation, or whether it's Tony Robbins video, you need that spark, something to like take you out of what it is you're dealing with and then focus somewhere else. And
Yeah.
those are the tools that are useful. to feed the subconscious, but also to connect within that light within you, right? So those are three aspects that I would definitely recommend to anybody going through any challenge, is to keep your consciousness as strong as possible through feeding it, right? So we become what we feed. But if we think about it, the movies we watch, the books we read, the people we surround ourselves with, all that stuff affects us in one way or another. And it's our job to be more selective of what goes in our minds, right?
Yeah.
You know?
I know quite a lot of people that wouldn't ever pick up or want to pick up a self-help book. I think you and I know that there's a lot out there we don't know. And actually, the only way you can finesse where you are already is picking up something. There may just be one sentence in one book that is another part of your toolbox. And if you never read that book, you'd never get that sentence. And I've just read Viktor E. Frankl's book and the meaning of he was at Auschwitz, and it was really helpful for me to understand how he found purpose in suffering. Because probably 3 or 4 years of what he suffered would be a lifetime for most people and more. But what he went through and endured would have just given him a very good basis for understanding how you can actually find purpose in such a wretched existence. And it helped me as well. So that's just one example. What I wanted to ask you is, did you have an epiphany or an aha moment where you felt, I do need to do more, because you do help yourself by helping others? And do you recall when that came to you?
There was 2 moments that I could think of at the moment. When I used to live in Los Angeles, and when I found out that I was moving back to Toronto, I thought that back to Canada, never mind like the weather and all that stuff. I thought it was the worst possible thing ever. Ever. Like, what kind of stupid idea? Like, we moved as a family to Los Angeles for the weather, for my health, right? Which was better, the warm weather and all that stuff. As you can see, I'm not tanned at the moment. We've just gone through this winter, never ending winter. So it was the worst possible thing ever. And a friend of mine who's always smiling, for the first time in my life, I told him, and his smile flipped upside down. And I'm just graduating high school, and I was just thinking for a moment, like, that's the worst thing ever. And I was so mad. I was so mad. I think that's the worst thing ever. Why would we do that? And I couldn't understand. I was mad. I was angry. I was upset. Like, I had to tell my friends, like, I couldn't see anything but that in my mind's eye. And over the years, once we moved back, I am beyond grateful that I did. And that, when I started meeting the practitioners and the mentors and the teachers and the coaches and the people that I've met here, and the man that took me from my walking stick out the wheelchair and put me on my crutches that I'm now, I wouldn't have met all these people without moving back here.
Yeah.
And that moment was the bigger picture, knowing that there's always a master plan. And sometimes we don't see it. Sometimes what we think is so important at the moment, it's hard. We have to focus on the bigger picture and what is really happening at that time. And that for me was one of the biggest moments that, like, I will always reflect back on that and realize, when a challenge does hit, not just asking why is this happening, but know that, something else that maybe we don't see at that moment is about to happen. And it may take time, maybe take a few months, maybe take a few years, but we can always look back and say, oh, if we're lucky enough to merit that moment, to look back and say, oh, that's why that happened, right?
Yeah. Okay. So that was one moment, and you said there was a second, or was that the two combined?
The second was a few years, I think it was a year ago or a few years ago. I'm going to summarize this more. It's a big story, but I was standing in a hospital after meeting with a doctor about a surgery that I didn't want to have. And we've had the conversation over and over. And I was just like, I finally made that decision. You know, that feeling when you finally make a decision, and it relieves you of like the burden of making that decision. So I finally made that decision. I said, I go ahead with what the doctor says. And there was so much doubt involved, right? And I'm standing there afterwards in the hospital hallway, and there's stretchers flying, and there's doctors running with their coffee in one hand and their cell phone in the other. And honestly, Tim, it was like chaos, right? They need like stoplights or robots in the hospital, right? To slow them down. Like, honestly, like, I don't know. People get injured, right? It's just standing there. And it was Halloween.
Okay.
And there was clowns, right? And I don't do well with clowns. And they're just like, you know, the costumes and the whole thing and everything. And I stood there for a moment, and I just froze, and I started crying. And the amount of pressure that I felt at that moment, it felt as if arrows were being shot at me from a bow and arrow from every direction. And the amount of pressure, it wasn't that I was going for another medical appointment or another thing that I'm always dealing with, another hospital appointment or this or that. It was everything else. I had like I said in the beginning, my vessel, my cup was over full. I didn't see how it was possible to handle another thing. I couldn't, like, I was just over capacity. The phone was ringing. I was backed up in every project imaginable, emails, like everything was just, it was just a lot. And now I just committed to another thing and another thing. Like, how was I supposed to take this on? And there was all this doubt surrounded by what the doctor said. So I stood there and I literally looked up to the heavens, and I said, you know, I just looked up and said, whether to speak with God or my guardians or whoever, like, anyone can do this. So for me, it was God. And I said, I'm not blaming. Just show me how. Just show me how. Because that's what I needed, was to know how to deal with all of this stuff. And for the first time in my life, it was like a movie played backwards that was rewinding, showing me everything that I accomplished in my mind's eye, everything that I've gone through. And I remember as soon as that finished, as I returned home, my dad called me and he was like, what happened? Like, because he knew I was at a hospital. Are you okay? What happened? And I was literally trembling. And I said to him, I said, today's the day I learned how strong I really am. And it goes back to what we said in the beginning, is just acknowledging all that was something that's, you know, it was always been difficult for me, but then I had to see it from an observer point of view. I had to see it from the outside.
Yeah.
And then I realized from then on, every challenge that came on, even though it's overwhelming, but I'm able to, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I got this. I can do this. Like, tapping into that source, right? So those
And
are the two.
thanks for sharing and being vulnerable. I know a lot of gentlemen in particular who don't know how to start being vulnerable because they see it as a weakness. I certainly don't. I would say, to back up your point, that the longer we live, and if you are having an ongoing health or life issue, you actually do remember, okay, I got this because that I dealt with something very similar and it was then. But you do need just some, what a hippo needs is wallow time. You need to just sit in the mud and go, yeah, it feels very dark right now, but actually the light happened before and it can happen again. And I've got a very recent example of my health and my lung function dipped after a very serious virus around Christmas. And it's probably the worst I've felt in over 30 years. And I was just recalling when I was at my first term at uni and my health did go downhill, that I was that ill. And it was a very comparable drop in lung function. And I was like, crikey, that's 30 years ago and I'm still around. So, I can, as dark as it feels, I can get through this and I can optimize and improve. So, yeah, the longer one goes, if you're mindful and thinking about it, it doesn't just happen unless you really put yourself out there mentally, uh, digest what's going on. You actually, the brain is um, amazing. The mind is fantastic, and we will delve into that. One of the things that you really star at, and I want to delve into that for you now, is public speaking. And what do you think is the hardest and easiest thing about speaking in a stage in front of people? Because it really isn't for everybody, and a lot of more people than not would say it's their worst nightmare. But what do you think? How do you feel you thrive so well? And again, what's easy, what's hard for you?
I used to get really nauseous right before I spoke on the stage, and I didn't understand why. I was I was popping mints, I was chewing gum, I was eating lemons. I'm like, what is this?
Right.
And then as soon as I started on the stage, it was gone.
Okay.
Right? As soon as I started. And then, a lot of my mentors, they would just, give all these breathing techniques and all this stuff. I'm like, is it fear or is it this? But like, what is that? Right? Is it acid? Like, I don't know. Like, should I take, alka powder or something like that? And then I realized like, it's this body is excited, and it's the same kind of feeling as being excited as being nervous,
Mm.
that the body uses the similar chemicals, right? And so then somebody just randomly saw. He's like, she said, what's going on? And I said, well, I told her what's going on, and she's like, okay, we'll start breathing through the stomach. Like, it's one thing to tell someone what to do; it's another thing to show them, right? So she showed me, like, breathe through the stomach, breathe in,
Through
breathe
the
out, breathe out.
diaphragm. Yep.
Yeah, something like that. So then it calmed down. Then I was like, oh, that's how you breathe.
Yeah, and which is
um,
why actors are probably the best people to ever speak to about maintaining their breath, because they breathe deep breaths through the diaphragm. So,
uh,
which is why they're very well versed at doing public speaking, even something super emotional. Because I've done a lot of public speaking like yourself, and when an actor is interviewed, not for a film, but just on radio or TV, even if it's really emotional, like one of their friends has passed away, they don't blub because they know how to control their breath. And they often will start a new sentence on the top of a breath rather than try and wait to try and get it all out in one go, at which point they falter, which is what most people would do. But yeah,
mm,
the breath is everything. And I don't have the best with my lungs, the best breath, but I learnt, as you have, there's 1 minute before I get on stage, I am doing those deep breaths from my diaphragm to my mouth. And a lady who's probably going to be a guest on this show, who teaches actors and people to public speak, she says, imagine your feet are growing roots into the ground, because
I heard
it
this.
really stabilizes you. And plant your
Yeah,
feet, and that's how I do the two together, the breathing and then the roots growing, as it were, for my feet. And that, just before I go on, is the difference. Because like you, once I'm on there and you got your first words out, you're just in a good space, because we know
yeah,
we enjoy it, don't we? And we also know we're credible, and that people will learn a lot, and it could even transform people's lives. And that's a real gift you could ever do in one day or one evening or 1 hour.
100%.
And when you're up there, the easiest thing for you, because I suppose it's because you know your narrative, you're not duping anyone. You're authentic.
Yeah, so I'm, somebody who is afraid of public speaking. It's important for them to know that, if you focus on the message, you focus on the message and the exactly what you said. There's someone in the audience that you can save a life, and you don't know who that is.
Mm.
And when I hear stories about somebody that I have no idea who they are, or never met them, that I've inspired them, is worth everything. You know, there was a story once that a guy came up to me before I spoke, and he was just saying how grateful he is for everything that I've been putting out there on the internet over time, because his girlfriend listened to it a lot. So I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Who is your girlfriend?" And he mentioned that she passed away. She was holding on to the messages that I was putting out there. It's like the people that don't say anything are the ones that are listening. It's the ones that are in the corners, the ones that are quiet, the ones that don't like or comment on your Facebook or your social media. You're inspiring people that you don't know. It's never about the likes, never about the numbers. It's about someone out there is watching that needs you right now. When I'm on stage, my priority is to make sure that I'm speaking from the heart, and it's about the audience, and it's about what do they need to hear right now.
Yeah.
And that is what motivates me, and that's what I do on the stage mostly. Whether it becomes I tend to be all over the place sometimes, and I enjoy that, and that's fine, because structure and scripting and all that stuff, it's just not my forte. It's not my thing, because I just don't like it that way. I prefer to use my heart and just ask the universe, ask God, have faith in what needs to be said, right? What do people need to hear? How can I help somebody? Like, what do I say now? Like, it's not about us, right? To take us out of the picture and become a conduit. And that is something that's very special to be able to do. And that is something that I encourage everyone to get to that place, to know if you can operate that way, maybe it will alleviate the fears of public speaking.
Yeah. The biggest hero of a speech is the audience. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to get more out of it than me. I've heard my spiel a few times now, but it's always intriguing for me, as it must be for you, who comes up to you at the end and what bit resonated the most. And it can be really varied.
Yeah.
And importantly, it may just be the first time they heard something that's going to transform their life or the life of loved ones. And that's you could go one could go one's whole life and never achieve that. So you do that many times, and I applaud you for it.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate that.
Now, you
And
did mention, sorry, my friend.
You sometimes you even hear something that you already heard before, but you needed to hear it again, right?
Yeah.
And that's always be open-minded, and always have that vessel, that cup empty, right, to receive something.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the word being grateful a minute ago. What do you think, for what are you most grateful for?
Every morning I have a practice, and that is, to just be thankful and be grateful for everything that I have in my life, and that's including friends, family, environment, health, everything that I have, like I said, I'm not comparing, but there's people that don't have, or a worst case scenarios or things like that, or people that are really struggling. Gratitude is something that attracts more goodness into our lives, and I stand by that, because it's true. The more gratitude you are, the more you feel that. When we do meditations, it's important for us to think about something you're grateful for, because you're bringing in that energy, that feeling within you, and somehow it relaxes the system. Somehow it makes you go, I'm grateful that, just saying those words, right, and being sincere about it is something, taps into this frequency, like a radio station, and then brings it back in. And when we do that, we open up to receive other things into our life. So not to be grateful with an agenda, but to just have in the back of your mind that it's going to allow you to tap into that frequency of more goodness to come your way.
Yeah. It's almost being aggressively kind. And actually, that's not a bad thing. It's not false, but one, in theory, should have a lot more to be grateful for. But you just need to understand what they are, and actually regularly in your mind or through meditation say it. Um,
Yeah.
what might be one of your strongest sort of memories um, that you would want to share
In terms of what?
in terms of how it affected you? You know, like a treasured memory. What might be one of your most treasured memories?
Hmm. That's a good question, Tim. It would always be something that initiated a positive emotion, right? So, I think if I think about something that made me feel that way, probably feeding a giraffe in the San Diego Zoo as a child.
I've been to that zoo.
Yeah.
I've got a great story there. I won a trip to meet the Spice Girls in
Oh, really?
1998, and they were playing at an outdoor amphitheater in San Diego because the weather's so good there, isn't it? But you wouldn't have an outdoor amphitheater in England, that's for sure. And yeah, we had a free trip to San Diego. This was Pepsi. So I won a trip with Pepsi to go and meet the
Wow.
Spice Girls, and I love San Diego. What a great place! I've stolen your thunder, but you were feeding a giraffe, which actually, Warren, is my favorite creature in the world.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
Why is that?
I just think that they don't look like they should exist, and they're just beautiful, and they're so striking. And
Huh.
I've seen them out in Africa in the wild, and it was the one thing I really wanted to see. They're just amazing.
Wow, that's great. I'm glad you did that. That's so cool. And you met the Spice Girls.
I met the Spice Girl. Well, they met me. That's the way I would like to say
Yeah, right?
it. So, what about that experience? Was it quite a spiritual moment, or how did it make you feel?
I was a child, but if I remember it, there must be an emotional part of it that hit my heart, because otherwise, why would we remember those good moments, right?
Yeah,
If it's a good moment or it's a not so good moment that we perceive to be negative, like we're going to remember things that stimulated us emotionally. And that's how our body works. That's how our mind works. So if I go back to that, it was joy. It was like, I can do this, or I'm feeding the giraffe, right? Um, and there's so many times in my life that I think about, and most of the time it's to do with nature, that I just really resonate with, that it just really re- just relaxes my system, or I achieve something I didn't think I could do. I remember it was a year, not even a year ago, I didn't think I'll be able to ride a horse again. And I'm sitting there with friends, and they're not pushing me, but they're looking at me. They're like, "Are you going to do it?" And I'm like, "No, no, it's going to hurt too much. I don't think it's worth it. No, no, let's not do it. Are you going to do it?" Like
mhm,
they're just quietly pushing me, because they know who, like, I know they know that if I don't do it, it's not my nature not to try, right? And I'm going to regret it and be thinking maybe I should have tried, like the whole trip back home, right? And I did. So I'm like, okay, fine, let's try. All right, guys. They're like, there you go. Where were you? Like, I wasn't being me, right?
yeah,
I was tired and stuff, and I was just nervous. And it was the best experience ever, because I said, okay, let's try. And you had the support around you. And it's like so many times those moments when it's like, just try. What's the worst that can possibly happen, right? That you don't fulfill exactly how you wanted it to end up, or maybe you can't do it, but you'll find another way. Like, I have such a strong growth mindset that I always want to just learn or figure it out or make it work, right? And yes, there's limitations that I may not be able to do, or may not be able to figure out just yet, but maybe in the future there would be a solution somehow, some miraculous scientific solution, or whatever it is that allows me to do something physically that I couldn't do before, right? But there's a
yeah,
way we can figure it out. I've seen, there's guys in wheelchairs skiing or playing basketball, or people with one, like, missing a leg running marathons. These people with disabilities are doing things that's people with a fixed mindset that don't have any physical disabilities are afraid to even try.
yeah,
And
yeah,
with all the good reasons, and you may have all the good reasons, and that's fine. But there's a way, with the right coaches, the right mentors, the right abilities, if you have the desire, run with it, right? Even if it's the smallest. And those are the memories that you will keep on, that you will save, that you will treasure forever, that you did it, that's something that you didn't think would be possible.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned mindset there, and I'm just guessing that you've read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset.
Yeah, I'm
There we
reading it
go.
right now.
Good man. Which is why you were very on point around fixed and growth mindset.
Yeah.
I know you. I've got you covered. It's a very good book. For those listening, Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck, a fantastic book called Mindset, with growth or fixed mindset. And you're more likely to fail going for growth, but you will achieve probably a bit more along the way, as opposed to fixed is, well, if I don't try much, I never really fail. So
Yeah.
I'll stay in my comfort zone. Thank you very much. Which is not the case for Warren and I, who like to keep pushing the envelope. Now, because this gift podcast is about the power of the mind, what do you think you've learned personally about the power of your mind with what you've endured and keep enduring throughout your life?
I'm able to, like I said before, feed it, train it, just like exercising, and
Flexing a
be
muscle,
able,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah, and be able to, as Dr. Wayne Dyer says a lot, Dr. Wayne Dyer would say, you know, when you change the way you look at things, the things around you change. To be able to apply all of these self-development or mindful techniques and bring them together into one that works for me. So, you know, not just using Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck's, or Wayne Dyer, or Abraham Hicks, or Tony Robbins, or, you know, all of the great ones, like, you know, or Louise Hay. It's more like taking, what I do is I take pieces of what works the best,
Mm.
and then apply what I feel works for best for me as well. And not to have like, okay, this is the way you do it, this is what's working for me, you know, and it's important for everyone else to find out what it is that they work for. So I think it's more like finding a way to make things happen, or thinking, you know, in a different mind frame, right? Taking yourself out and being the observer, you know,
Yeah.
of what is actually happening, you know, and also like to be aware is so important. Awareness of our current state of being, our current emotional status, our current pain. If there's a pain, to be aware of it, not just push it away, but build a relationship with it. And like, why is that happening? You know, not to make yourself crazy about questioning it, but like, okay, there's a pain there. What is it telling me? Maybe there's something about that. Maybe I can learn from that. And then it starts to, you know, gradually evolve to what it needs to be, right? Yeah,
And
I
a
don't
lot
think
of,
pain.
sorry, Warren, go for it.
I don't think pain is meant to hold us back. I think it's there to guide us somehow, um, to push us into the direction that we need to be pushed into. You know, sometimes maybe if your ankle is hurting, or you hurt your ankle or something, maybe it's telling you, you know, are you afraid to moving forward, or things like that. But I know that there's tremendous drastic, like, you know, agonizing pains out there that people experience, and I get that, and I've been there, and I've screamed, I've shouted, I've yelled, I've trembled, I've shaken, I've cried, I've been on morphine for like 23 days at one time, and I know what that is, but there has to be a way that we can overcome that with our minds.
Well, and you're putting
um,
that into practice, Warren.
I am.
And when you see it helping you, you know it's not falsity. You know it's something you want to go after and finesse.
Yeah. Yes, and teach other people to do the same, or at least guide them. There's so many resources out there of people doing neuroplasticity and practicing neuroplasticity, and Joe Dispenza's work and all that stuff, like that you can change things. It's possible. but it takes discipline and practice and certainty, but also being open to the fact that it may not turn out the way that you intend for it to turn out, but maybe something else will happen, maybe something better, or maybe it's just not meant. It's the process, it's the journey,
Yeah.
right? So.
Now, another huge element for me, and I see a lot of people who struggle to get into it, is being more present, the famous in the moment. Uh, what would you say, how do you achieve being more present, and how does it help you?
Tremendously. It's Eckhart Tolle is like, he's the master of that. He always says that, when you're anxious or when you're nervous or when you're frustrated, or so, it's like you wanting to be there and you're not being here.
Hmm.
And that's all he had to say. If anything, that's all he had to say. And I'm good with all of his work, even if I haven't read it all. Like, that's all I needed to hear, because it's true. When you're here, you're aware. Why would you want to speed up time? Right?
Yeah.
Being anxious. Why would you get anxious about what's going to happen next? Or not being present? When we're present, every moment affects the next moment. Every word we speak, every thought, every action, everything that we're doing at this moment, every smile, every energy force, every frequency we tap into is affecting the next moment. So if we're focusing on the worst possible outcome and not being present, then we're just feeding that. But if we're focusing on the best possible outcome in this present moment, and we're grounding, and like you said, planting our roots, or we're grounding ourselves, or we're being calm, what could we possibly be doing better than sending that energy into the next moment? And that's what just happened. That's what just happened now, right? Like 2 seconds ago, we're talking about this stuff, and then this conversation is going in this direction, right? Because of the two of us talking, and everything can be used as an example if we think about it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Now, the last 3 weeks, as I sort of talked about a bit earlier, I've had to undergo quite serious intravenous treatment because my lungs got badly damaged before Christmas by a virus. And now I was on almost like 18-hour-day meds. Like, there's only about 6 hours of my day that was probably when I was sleeping. It was the only time I wasn't taking medication. But do you know what I felt the most important part, or as important part of my day, was being at the front of the back of our garden. I would be with nature, and I would do my deep breathing and meditation, and that actually felt as helpful to my mental state as what physically the drugs were doing for my physical state. And why it was so important to me about being out in nature is by listening to the bird song, seeing the blue sky. Well, actually, not so much in this country at this time of year, just like in Toronto, but just seeing the clouds, seeing the trees, seeing the sun. Sun did try and break through. Just sitting on with a nice cup of coffee actually felt like the most serene and contented part of my day. Now, if I didn't go out and get that level of contentment and grace and gratitude, I think my day would have just felt a slave to the treatment rhythm. And mentally, I'd have felt more anguished. Now, you're a star because you mentioned nature. And obviously, you and I are probably very similar in our respect that we do get a lot from being still in the moment. And nature is one way that I use it. But is it one for you, or do you use other ways that you get stillness?
I use it. Yeah. It's a bit hard with the weather conditions in Canada.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just, nature, meditation, mindfulness techniques, energy healing work. It's all anything that's going to calm the system is something that I lean towards.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I got to do one of those things every day.
And is there one routine or habit that you do every day that contributes to your ability to be successful? You mentioned meditation, but it may be something else that you do every day that helps.
It's definitely feeding the subconscious. As I mentioned before, it's something that is very important, and I notice the difference when I'm not doing that. So that's on a physical level, is reading something or listening to an audio tape or having a learning course, taking a course or conference, those online courses or
Hmm.
group calls or something like that. Something that you're going to learn something, um, or talk with a coach or whatever it is, like something that's going to, because we get so immersed in what is going on, and we need that strength to. It's not a temporary fix, but your subconscious hears it. Even if you're reading a book and you're not even focusing on the words, or you're listening to an audiobook, somehow a few days later we remember something that we needed to.
Yeah.
When we do it daily, we're strengthening that. We're building it up. We are feeding our bank supply of information, and the information is awareness, and consciousness is knowledge. And if we think about it, the more knowledge we have, the more consciousness we have, the more we're able to deal with situations in a different light. And something that every day that I do definitely make sure I do is something that I love to do, something that brings me joy every morning, to make sure I'm doing that before I start my day, right? So, I've been very disciplined about not turning on social media in the morning, or not turning on my phone, whether until I'm ready. If you think about it, like would you want a surprise party walking into your room when you're just, you're just waking up? Like, you could not even, maybe you're not even wearing any clothes, or you got your pajamas on, or like your hair is this way and that. Like, that's what I tell my students, or when I'm coaching someone, is like, think about it that way. As soon as you open up that phone or that computer, and if there's an influx of like all this stuff coming at you, like, are you mentally, physically ready for all that,
Mm.
right? Like, would you go out into the street, like, without makeup, or whatever it is, So I would make sure I'm ready physically, mentally in the morning, and then do something joyous. And for me, something joyous is getting things done that I want to do every day, whether it be exercising, or reading something, or having a smoothie, or whatever it is, before I let the world in,
Yeah.
right?
That's very good
And
advice. Very good advice. And
yeah,
I don't always achieve that myself, so I need to go back to that.
yeah, because yeah, let me know how it goes. Like, if you notice the difference,
Even I think
especially,
if you can commit to the first hour, you don't go anywhere near it. That's a good start.
yeah. Yeah, and then I'll deal with everything later, like, why aren't you answering your phone? Where are you? All that stuff. I'll just and that's why it's important to wake up early, right? So you have time not to answer. Right.
Now, despite your hardships, and I know you've been through a fair bit, my friend, I do expect and imagine you've had some excellent days. If there was a teleporter that could go back to one particular day, what might it be that you really treasure?
If I could go back in time, I would definitely have a chat with my younger self.
Good,
And
good answer. I like that.
thank you.
What age would you have been?
A couple different ages.
Okay.
um, I would definitely go back to any times where it may feel depressed or whatnot. Um, I want to be able to have the tools that I have now earlier on, at an earlier age, and the awareness, and I know that it's achieved through growth and experience. But there are some times when it was just so difficult for me as a child that, like, I needed to hear what I needed to hear now.
Mm.
And it happens all the time. Like, there's videos on Facebook that I must have posted like years ago, if I go back and listen to them, it's like me talking to me that I needed to hear me,
Yeah.
right? And I don't care, like if there was no views or whatnot, that's how I got started. Like I just broke out of my shell and started sharing. It was hard for me, like to express what I wanted to express, my desire, because, you know, like with everybody else, you talk about stage fright earlier. I'm talking about, like, you know, there's visual physical deformities about myself that I'm not, maybe I haven't owned completely, but to put out to the world these messages, it was hard taking that leap. And yeah, you know, the sound of your voice on tape versus the sound of your voice that you hear from the echo of your bones, right? It's different.
It's different.
And a lot of people battle with that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm glad that I took that leap. Like, okay, it's not, I don't, like, to overcome that, right? To own it. So, you know,
And once you've
yeah.
opened Pandora's box, Warren, you realize I can't put the lid back on. Let's go with this. And actually, do you know what? It felt pretty cathartic or therapeutic, and it's helping others. That was a good leap of faith.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. You get that, is it dopamine, or it's one of
Yeah,
those,
it's one of those. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, one of those, like you feel like
So it's a sort of good feeling drug, a good feeling rush, isn't it?
the serotonin, I think it is the
Okay.
one that, like, yeah, I think there's like, I remember hearing a study about how an act of kindness, I'm not sure exactly if it was serotonin, but the serotonin levels rise when a person does an act of kindness for another person. And then the serotonin also rises when the person receiving the act of kindness also receives that. But what was funny about the study was that the person watching, both the recipient and the giver, their serotonin rises as well.
Wow.
And then I believe this is what the study was. And then it said that not only that, but serotonin is I believe it's the happiness, or the that drug that somehow strengthens the immune system, and like it went into, the study went into the whole thing. But I think Wayne Dyer mentioned it also. But it was just like, if you think about it, like there's more to giving than we know. There's more to compassion than we know. There's more to everything that we know, right? So what's most, you know, valuable is like our life is our gift, and our gift is our life, and that's something that, like, we just have to treasure, right?
Yeah. Now, as this podcast is called The Gift, and you've already dished out some great advice, but what might be one lasting either quote or bit of advice you'd like to share with listeners?
Focus on the bigger picture and not what we think is just so important at a given moment that may seem challenging for you. That would be
That'd be it.
something
That's your
to,
golden nugget. And thank you for that.
no
Now,
problem.
how can people find you or contact you? What would be the best ways they can do that if they want to reach out or hear more about what you've done and are doing?
Sure. You can go to walkwithwarren.com, and my website is up there, and you can find me on Instagram at I am Warren F. F is in Frank, on Instagram, and my full name is Warren Falkenstein on Facebook. So I'm on YouTube and everywhere, but, you know, the website will give people the social media channels, and, you know, there's coaching programs available, as well as stage talks and bookings and all that stuff. So you're welcome to visit me there, find me there, and I'd be more than happy to continue this conversation with whoever is interested in having that chat.
Good. And I urge listeners to reach out to Warren. He's he's an amazing example of a human being, i.e., someone that's being rather than just doing, and that means a lot that you've been my guest. So thank you, and maybe with new questions down the line, we can get you back on.
For sure. Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
And congratulations on being the first Canadian on the Gift podcast. There you are.
Oh, yeah.
You can rest easy tonight.
Well, we should actually, I know you, I from I was born in South Africa, so I know the like the robots and the boots and
Ah,
the,
yeah.
you know, the rubbish bin and all that stuff. So a word here is, when I moved here, it was from LA, was I asked someone for soda, and they're like, what? It's called pop.
It's called pop in Canada. You think that both
Yeah,
North America, all North America, would use soda? It's interesting, isn't it?
it was that one guy.
Okay.
But it was just like, I was like, oh, okay. So there's your word of the day.
There's my word of the day. Warren, thanks for being on my show. And for listeners, do tell others about this show. That's how the word of mouth works in modern day marketing. Do subscribe and rate the podcast, and maybe even leave a comment. So thank you for listening. I leave you, as I always do, yours cup half full. Thank you. Bye.